and welcome to the Farming Week, the podcast from Agriland that keeps you up to date with all the latest in Irish agriculture. I'm Louise Hickey and I'm joined today by journalists Aisling O'Brien, Breifne O'Brien and Colm Ryan. Aisling, the Minister for Agriculture, Charlie McConalogue, announced the issuing of acres interim payments to participants this week. What does this mean and who can avail?
So this is good news for almost 24,000 farmers participating in acres, Louise, that they will finally receive a payment under the scheme. So the interim payment being issued by the Department of Agriculture applies to 23,709 farmers in Tranche 1 of the Agri-Environmental Scheme who have not yet received an advance payment for participating. Now, as had been previously confirmed by Minister McConalogue, the payment rates will be €4,000 for those in the Acres General approach and €5,000 for participants in Acres Cooperation. So it'll give a total overall payment of just over €113 million. So depending on what bank or financial institution you're with, it may take a few days to land into your account, but make sure to keep an eye out for it. And if it doesn't land, be sure to get in touch with the department. And look, just to note that the minister did say there is a small number of applications that require further processing, and the interim payment in respect of that cohort of farmers will issue in around 10 days' time. So it is probably worth checking with the department if you're among that small cohort, and then at least you'd have a better idea when that payment should land into your account. So look, it is good news. The minister had pledged to make these payments by the end of the month. There had been many issues flagged by the department. We have 46,000 farmers taking part in Tranche 1 of acres, and obviously that leads to a lot of complications. We had IT issues as well within the department, Louise. So it looks like those are being ironed out on the whole at the moment for acres participants, which is great. And look, the acres payments, the overall payments are still being processed by the department, and they have the intention of making payments to all eligible participants in June. So that's in a couple of months' time. And the combination of numbers involved, the complexity of the payment calculations, and it being the first year of the scheme, the minister said, is why we're getting all of these delays. And a letter is being issued this week to all acres participants who are getting an interim payment to let them know that this payment is going to take it will be taken into account when you have the payments in June as well. So you're not going to get overpaid, but there might be a smaller payment or a lesser payment then later on in the year as well. So that's how it will be worked out. And, you know, it is something that farmers have been waiting a very long time for, Louise. They've been actively participating in this scheme. They've signed up in their thousands. So, you know, it is great to see that they are finally getting these interim payments. Look, advance payments have issued already to over 19,700 acres farmers at a cost of some €85 million. So there has been payments made. It's not that there hasn't, but there is a substantial amount of farmers who will be breathing a sigh of relief to see that money landing into their account now.
Absolutely. And the Minister also announced this week that not all farmers in the 2023 Eco Scheme will receive a payment. Why is this the case, Aisling?
Yeah, so Minister McConalogue has confirmed that not all of those farmers are going to receive a payment. He said it was due to issues with applications made by farmers or their farm advisor. He didn't specify how many farmers are going to be impacted because he said the department is still working through outstanding applications. And look, the Eco Scheme was a new measure introduced under the new cap. It's obviously a voluntary scheme and it's paid on an annual basis per eligible hectare, and the payment rate is €67 per eligible hectare for the 2023 scheme. The latest data that we have from the department shows that €1.1 million was paid out to farmers under the Eco Scheme last week. And overall, some 117,000 farmers have now been paid out almost €298 million under the scheme. So this issue was raised in a parliamentary question this week by Kerry Independent TD Michael Healy-Rae. He was asking for an update about how many applicants had encountered IT issues with the department when it came to space for nature. And that's used in the Eco Scheme as part of the calculations. And it's part of the actions that farmers can take as well. So the minister said that the department had published estimates for space for nature using satellite imagery for all farmers in September 2022. And if a farmer decided to apply for the scheme under Agricultural Practice 1, which is space for nature, they had to be 7% or greater for the standard measure or 10% or more for the enhanced measure. And in a case where a farmer was under those percentages, they could mark in additional features that were not already marked in, such as indicative estimates or features such as a new hedge or grove of trees, which had only recently been planted and may not have been picked up by the satellite imagery. And he said where such edits or additional features are marked in at application stage, these added features must be validated and digitised by the department. And he said that all digitising for the eco scheme for 2023 has now been completed. But he said there are around 7,000 applications still being processed. And he said that not all of those will result in a payment because in some cases, the farmer or the advisor submitted an application under both a temporary reference number and the herd number. And he said approximately 850 of that number were also farmers who chose the Agricultural Practice 2, which is extensive livestock, but chose the year 2023 for stocking. So that means that the department are going to have to wait until February this month to verify the stocking rate for 2023. And he said that process is now complete and those cases are being presented for payment, is how he put it. So, it is obviously a cause for concern for some outstanding eco scheme participants, and obviously something that they'll want to keep a very close eye on. But the minister, interestingly, putting it back onto farmers and advisors there, Louise, and we'll have to wait and see how that goes down with the advisors out there.
And some of the biggest news this week was the passing of the Nature Restoration Law by European Parliament. The vote saw 329 MEPs vote in favour and 275 vote against. Aisling, what happens now?
Yeah, so this law, first proposed by the EU Commission back in the summer of 2022, seeks to restore at least 20% of the EU's land and sea areas by the end of this decade and all ecosystems by mid-century, by 2050. And it puts forward measures to restore urban, forest, agricultural and marine ecosystems. Highly divisive from the start, Louise. I'd argue that many members of the public hadn't heard of the Nature Restoration Law before this week because it has wandered into the general political realm and it has caused a lot of tension among parties. But more on that in a little bit. Look, farming organisations as well have voiced major concerns about the potential impact of this and how it's going to be funded. Those in favour, the environmental lobby, argue it might not be perfect, but it is a step in the right direction to restore habitats. And they say it will be voluntary for farmers and they won't have to take any land out of production. But back to the vote, and as you said, the Nature Restoration Law was passed during a plenary vote of the European Parliament on Tuesday, and it was a vote on a compromise position agreed between negotiators from the Parliament and the European Council last November. And then it's going to go back now to the European Council and they are going to formally decide whether to adopt this law. And it's understood that the Council will make that decision towards the end of next month. And it's expected that the Council will adopt the law, which would be its final hurdle then essentially, Louise, and it would then have a lead-in time of around 2 years for member states to get on board and get their house in order, so to speak. And look, interesting to note that ahead of the crunch vote in the Parliament, the European People's Party, the EPP, Fine Gael is a member of that grouping. It has 177 MEPs, the largest grouping in the European Parliament. And they said in advance that they were going to vote against the proposal. But the 5 Irish Fine Gael MEPs who are part of the EPP, Sean Kelly, Francis Fitzgerald, Deirdre Clune, Maria Walsh and Colm Markey, said that they were going to defy this and vote in favour of the law. And look, indeed, we see all but 2 of the Irish MEPs voted in favour. Luke Flanagan, the Independent, and Sinn Féin's Chris McManus both voted against. Ming Flanagan had indicated well in advance that he wasn't happy with the content of the law. He didn't feel it went far enough to protect and restore nature. And he also had major questions about how it would be funded. Chris McManus said that key concerns of farmers hadn't been met and that's why he could not support it.
And following on from that then, what was some of the reaction we heard from farm organisations and politicians following the vote?
So unsurprisingly, Louise, farm organisations have voiced their disappointment, and that's being kind about it, at the outcome of this vote. And they've said it will lead to huge concerns amongst the farming community. The IFA president, Francie Gorman, claimed that there is a vacuum of information still around the nature restoration law. And he said that legitimate farmer concerns had not been adequately addressed, and the EU had pushed ahead regardless of those concerns. And he said that the issues with the law include a lack of clarity on the requirements and the impact of certain definitions, uncertainty on the potential impact on farmland and production, and a lack of dedicated funding to support the implementation of this regulation. And I suppose the Irish Cattle and Sheep Farmers Association President Sean McNamara was echoing those sentiments as well. He said that the nature restoration law has been an example of how not to do policy, where a lot of goodwill from farmers had been thrown away in the interests of political legacy and top-down control. And he pointed to the experiences of farmers with designated lands, Louise, and I suppose the fears that they may have that this could be repeated when it comes to the nature restoration law. And there has been a scaling back when it comes to re-wetting. We had huge concerns in this country. But Sean McNamara is saying, look, that will be up to government to push back and to secure, I suppose, the flexibilities that are built into the law for countries like Ireland, where we have a peatland component. And he was just voicing that concern that may not come to pass. And you're really putting your future into the hands of the politicians. And he didn't seem to have much faith in that. The ICMSA president, Dennis Drennan, as well, said there was a lack of detail over what level of restoration is going to be required. And he said it seemed that the state is intent on effectively ordering farmers whose forefathers and mothers had given their working lives to make holdings productive and viable to take that land out of production and restore it in some vague fashion to a non-productive state. Of course, we've heard previously from the government that they reckon that they will be able to meet the requirements under the nature restoration law by state land, and re-wetting that state land as opposed to bringing farmers' land into it. And they've stressed the voluntary nature of it. But that's up until 2030. And what happens after that, Louise, is still very much up for debate. And that's exactly what the Irish Nature and Hill Farmers Association President Vincent Roddy raised in his response. He said the land designations, this impact could be felt in 10, 15 or 20 years' time. And we have to ensure that that doesn't happen. And, we are going to see a period now of public consultation. Minister for Heritage, Malcolm Noonan, who welcomed the outcome of the vote, said that he is going to engage in a period of public consultation with farmers and all interest groups about nature restoration and see how we can bring this forward. The question of funding still remains up in the air, though, Louise, and that is a cause for concern.
Thanks, Aisling. Now, this week, Agriland launched a series with the Department of Agriculture which focuses on organic farming. You can catch up on interviews with Minister of State Pippa Hackett, organic farm advisors, and see our visit to an organic farm over on agriland.ie. There is also a panel discussion in the Agriland studio with several guests, including Head of Organic Unit in the Department of Agriculture, Jack Nolan. Now, I'm joined by our beef technical specialist, Breifne O'Brien. Breifne, this week, Teagasc confirmed that plans are currently in place to develop an organic beef research farm at Johnstown Castle, County Wexford. What do we know about the farm so far?
Yeah, that's right, Louise. So Teagasc confirmed the plans are currently in place to develop an organic beef research farm at Johnstown Castle in County Wexford. So this is going to be a 40-hectare or 98.8 acre farm. It's called Kildavin Farm at Johnstown Castle in County Wexford, and it will prepare for organic conversion in the summer of 2024 before the first influx of organic weanlings arrive on the farm in the autumn time. So these weanlings are going to be carried through to beef on the farm, and they will consist of both early and late maturing beef breeds, and there will be a number of different research trials conducted on these cattle. So actually a post on the Teagasc website earlier this week, Teagasc organic specialist Joe Kelleher explained that there has been an unprecedented increase in the number of farmers converting to organics over the past 2 years, including a significant number of beef farmers. However, he did say that the rise in the number of organic beef farmers will naturally enough lead to an increase in the availability of organic beef on Irish farms. In the past, up to 30% of this organic beef has leaked annually into conventional systems. So this ultimately means that these organic cattle are being produced on organic suckler farms, but their weanlings or maybe store cattle are then being bought up by conventional buyers. So obviously the hope is in the future that these cattle will not be leaking from the organic system. So this project was going to be funded by the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine, as well as Teagasc, and it will be called the Grow Farm S project, which is being undertaken in conjunction with UCD, and it aims to develop clear guidelines for the efficient and profitable organic beef finishing systems. I suppose just some of the key objectives of the Grow Farm S project includes optimising lifetime growth rates to reach target carcass weight and fat scores as early as possible, so ultimately to reduce the slaughter age of these cattle. It also aims to produce adequate forage of sufficiently high quality in the absence of inorganic fertilisers, as well as minimising the importation of supplementary concentrate feeds. It also aims to maintain the highest levels of animal health and welfare with minimal use of antimicrobials. The Grow Farm S project will also evaluate varying finishing diets and finishing ages on the Teagasc, Grange, Animal and Grassland Research Centre. The combined research at both Grange and the Kildavin sites will help to develop clear guidelines as to the most efficient organic beef finishing systems to enable organic farmers to adopt these practices with confidence. The Grow Farm S project also includes sheep system trials to be undertaken at the Teagasc Athenry Animal and Grassland Research and Innovation Centre, and will also include the collection of environmental benchmarking data on organic farms. The project will commence in March 2024 and will run for 4 years.
Thanks, Breifne. Now, Agriland had a 24-hour ad hoc survey this week on whether farmers would support protests at Dublin Airport Authority airports if passenger numbers are increased by 25%. What was the result there, Aisling?
Yeah, so we had a great response to this survey, Louise, and we asked our readers a couple of different questions. And I suppose the first one was, should Dublin Airport Authority get the green light to increase passengers by 25%? The response was 67% no and 33% yes. So the DAA have currently asked Fingal County Council to increase the cap that exists on passenger numbers. It's currently around 32 million, and they're looking to increase that. The Dublin Airport Authority, airlines, all in favour of this, obviously. They've spoken about the economic benefit to increasing airport traffic. But of course, then there would be an environmental and emissions impact as well. And I suppose on that, we also asked our readers if passenger numbers did increase at Dublin Airport Authority airports, should the emission ceiling for agriculture, which also stands at 25%, be lowered? An overwhelming majority, 98%, said yes to that question. And the final question that we put to our readers was, would you support protests at Dublin Airport Authority airports if passenger numbers increased? And 78% said that they would. And that is interesting because it comes on the back of a protest we saw earlier this week. The IFA in Cork came together, and it is part of the Enough is Enough campaign that we have been covering on Agriland. But as part of that campaign, they gathered outside Cork Airport, a convoy of tractors, and they drove up and down for about a half an hour. And, I did speak with the Cork Central chair, that's Matthew Hurley, and he told me that the convoy was to highlight the unfairness of Dublin Airport seeking to increase passenger numbers by 25%, while farmers have to cut their emissions by the same amount. And he asked, as a nation, are we prioritising flights over food? And he said it didn't seem to make a whole pile of sense to him. He said farmers would like to expand and keep growing their business as Dublin Airport would, and they were just highlighting the unfairness. So very, very interesting findings there, Louise, and we'll have to see what Fingal County Council comes back to the Dublin Airport Authority with.
Thanks, Aisling. Now, this week on Agriland, we had a very emotive story and video of flooded fields, homes and farm buildings under threat near the shores of Lough Funshinagh in County Roscommon. People living in the area fear that water levels could reach a new record. Agriland journalist Colm Ryan spoke to some people living in the area. Here's a clip from some of the locals.
It's all very disturbing, worrying. It's a source of anxiety.
I used to be nearly crying. The tension and the mental effect that had on me coming down there and know what is going to be wrong and where am I going to go.
And Colm, what were you hearing from people in the area and what is the future for Lough Funshinagh?
So the people at Lough Funshinagh in Roscommon, they're frustrated. That was the impression we got straight away. Even getting to Lough Funshinagh, access to the area is quite poor at the moment due to the road closures from the water levels rising at the lake. So just little inconveniences around the area. But then once you get closer to the actual homes, to the farms around the loch, you really see how bad it is. Water levels have risen and they are surrounding a lot of homes in the area. Now, these residents that are living there, they have said that moving to different areas is just not practical for them at all because a lot of them are farmers. So these farmers, they are calving at the minute. They're lambing as well. Mary Beattie, her home is overlooking Lough Funshinagh. The water levels have risen and they have flooded her home on a number of occasions. But she is herself a farmer, and she has said that she will not be moving because she has animals that are calving, sheep that are lambing as well. That was the same with Finola and me, another lady that we spoke to at Lough Funshinagh. She is also going to be lambing in the coming weeks. So just a lot of people are affected by the flooding, and just the impact that it has had on the area is just huge. We spoke to John and Eamon Leonard as well. They're farmers beside the loch. They had to bring a vet to tend to their cattle recently. They had to bring the vet to their farm in the bucket of a tractor because the roads around the area were completely flooded and they're not accessible any other way, unfortunately. So, yeah, the people are frustrated at Lough Funshinagh. They were saying, though, that there is a bit of optimism for the future in the fact that they are looking into undertaking ecological and environmental assessments into flood relief works surrounding the loch. So that is something that there is no time frame for when it may come to pass, but they are just remaining optimistic that it will be done in the near future.
That video can be watched over on agriland.ie. But just to end the podcast on a lighter note, today marks February 29th, which most of us will traditionally recognise as a leap day. It is associated with the Irish tradition of a woman being able to propose marriage. Colm, have you heard of any farmers bending the knee so far today?
Yeah, so that's the tradition, is that women are to propose on a leap day. Haven't heard of it myself yet now, but the day is still ongoing, I suppose. But there are a few appeals for people out there if they're not willing to engage in that tradition, that they might find a bit of peace coming to marts around the country that have sheep sales, because instead of an engagement ring being offered, it's rings of sheep that people are being urged to have a look at. So that was the one particular appeal from Ballinrobe Mart in County Mayo, who said their weekly sheep sale, which was falling on the leap day today, the ring of sheep on display today might be a bit of a better option for people who maybe weren't interested in engaging with that particular tradition.
Probably be a slew of men looking for refuge there in the mart today, I'd say.
I'm sure they're regularly busy there anyway, but maybe we'll have to compare the figures from the previous sales to today. But no, they said it is a once in a lifetime opportunity, that particular sale today, because they won't actually be hosting another sheep sale on a Thursday. That's the day they have their sale. They won't be able to have another sheep sale of a Thursday on a leap day until it's 2052. So that's not for another 28 years. So I hope nobody missed that this morning anyway.
And if you do find yourself in that position of a proposal today, we wish you the best of luck. If you're looking for somewhere to celebrate, it might be worth checking out a €90 per person steak, which has come to a restaurant in Dublin and claims to be the world's best. We have some more detail on that on agriland.ie. Now, I'm afraid that's all we have time for on this week's episode of the Farming Week. Just a reminder that tomorrow, March 1st, marks the closure of the hedge cutting season. Under the Wildlife Act, the cutting, grubbing, burning or other destruction of vegetation growing in any hedge or ditch is illegal between March 1st and August 31st. Thank you for listening. Please don't forget to rate, review and follow The Farming Week on Spotify, Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love if you could spare some time to give us 5 stars or share it to anyone who you think might be interested. All the best for the week ahead from myself, Aisling, Breifne and Colm.